Hi, I'm Kathy Daneman, and on behalf of Mystery Writers of America, welcome to a discussion with our nominees for Best Short Story and the winner of the Robert L. Fish Memorial Award. Before we begin, a few notes. You can learn about upcoming Edgar panels by following us on social media using the hashtag Edgars2022 or by visiting the websites mysterywriters.org or theedgars.com. You can watch the Edgar Awards live streamed on April 28th on our YouTube channel. I will be posting links to the panelists' stories and to the one book that's available. Today's bookseller is Centuries and Sleuths in Forest Park, Illinois. Please feel free to submit questions in the Q&A box throughout the discussion, and we'll get to them toward the end of the hour. And now it is my pleasure to introduce tonight's moderator, James Latoile. James uses his 29 years behind bars as an influence in his novels, short stories, and screenplays. He is a former associate warden in a maximum security prison, a hostage negotiator, facility captain, and director of California's state parole system. He has been nominated for the Silver Falchion for Best Procedural Mystery and the Bill Kreider Award for Short Fiction. His next novel, Dead Drop, is coming in the summer of 2022. You can find out more at jameslatoile.com. And with that, I turn it over to you, James. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. And thank you for tuning in to tonight's Edgar Award Symposium for Best Short Story and to celebrate the winner of the Robert L. Fish Memorial Award for the Best First Short Story. I really need to thank MWA and Marjorie Flax and Donna Andrews for their support during the process, and especially my fellow judges, Lexia Gordon, Nancy Cole Silverman, and Lynn Chandler Willis, who read and reread over 360 submissions. And again, thank you to these Edgar Award nominees who rose to the top with these brilliant stories. As we talk tonight with these talented authors, please submit any questions you have in the chat, and we'll try to get to them as we go on. But it's my honor to introduce the Edgar Award nominees and the Fish Memorial Award winner. Michael Bracken and James A. Hearn for Blindsided for the Alfred Hitchcock Mystery Magazine. Michael Bracken has written several books, but is better known as the author for 1,200 plus short stories. That's an amazing number. Published in the Alfred Hitchcock Mystery Magazine, Ellery Queen's Mystery Magazine, the Best American Mystery Short Stories, Best Mystery Stories of the Years, and many other publications. He's the editor of Black Cat Mystery Magazine, associate editor of Black Cat Weekly, and editor or co-editor of more than a dozen anthologies, including the Anthony Award nominated The Eyes of Texas, The Private Eyes from the Panhandle to the Piney Woods. So welcome, Michael.
Thank you.
James A. Hearn, Andrew. Andrew is an attorney who writes in a variety of genres, including crime fiction, science fiction, fantasy, and horror. His fiction has appeared in Alfred Hitchcock's Mystery Magazine, Black Cat Mystery Magazine, Monsters, Movie, and Mayhem, and various anthologies such as The Eyes of Texas, Guns and Tacos, Mickey Finn, and Peace and Love and Crime. And visit his website at jamesahern.com for more information. Hi, Andrew. Glad you could join us. I'm glad you and Michael survived the weather out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was scary for a little bit. Some rough weather, some tornadoes, but I think we're in the clear now.
Good. Our next is V.M. Burns, or Valerie Burns, for the Vermeer Conspiracy in the Midnight Hour anthology. Valerie was born and raised in South Bend, Indiana. She currently resides in the warmer region of the country in Ringgold, Georgia, with her two poodles. Valerie is a member of Mystery Writers of America, Dog Writers of America, Crime Writers of Color, International Thriller Writers, is on the national board of Sisters in Crime. She is also a mentor in the Writing Popular Fiction program at Seton Hall University in Greenburgh, PA. Valerie is the author of 16, I lost count, Valerie, 16 R.J. Franklin mysteries, the Dog Club mysteries, the Agatha Award nominated mystery bookshop series, and the soon to be released Baker Street mysteries. Welcome, Valerie.
Thank you.
Tracy Clark for Lucky 13 in the Midnight Hour anthology. Tracy is a native Chicagoan. She's the author of the Cass Raines Chicago Mystery Series, featuring ex-cop turned PI Cassandra Raines, a multi-nominated Anthony, Lefty, and Seamus Award finalist, Tracy is also the 2020 winner of the Putnam's and Sons Sue Grafton Memorial Award. She's a member of Crime Writers in Color, Sisters in Crime, and Mystery Writers of America, and sits on the boards of BoucherCon National and the Midwest Mystery Conference. Her latest Chicago Mystery Runner, released in June 2021, has been shortlisted for the 2020 Putnam Sons Sue Grafton Memorial Award, and was also just recently recognized as a nominee at the Lefty Awards. Her next novel, Hide, featuring Detective Harriet Foster, releases in December 2020. Tracy's book features intelligent, gutsy, hard-driving female main characters of color and a cast of supporting characters that reflect the richness and diversity in the world in which we live. The Cast Range series grew out of her desire to see capable, competent African-American characters on the page as major players in their own stories. A lifelong Southsider, Tracy works as an editor in a challenging newspaper business, and as a patient, understanding, and supportive Chicagoan, she roots for the Cubs, the Sox, the Bears, the Blackhawks, and the Chicago Sky and Fire equally. Welcome, Tracy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. R.T. Lawton, The Road to Hannah on the Alfred Hitchcock Mystery Magazine. R.T. is a retired federal law enforcement agent, past member of the Mystery Writers of America Board of Directors, and has over 150 short stories in various anthologies and other publications, to include 48 sold to Alfred Hitchcock Magazine. He currently has 6 short story collections in both paperback and e-format on Amazon, and 2 more collections to be published in 2022. RT, welcome.
Honored to be here.
Good to see you. Gigi Pondian, The Locked Room Library from the Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine. Gigi is a USA Today best-selling, award-winning mystery author, a breast cancer survivor, and a locked room mystery enthusiast. The child of cultural anthropologists from New Mexico and the southern tip of India, she spent her childhood being dragged around the world on research trips and now lives outside San Francisco. She writes the J.A. Jones Treasure Hunt Mysteries, the Accidental Alchemist Mysteries, the Secret Staircase Mysteries, and she's been awarded the Agatha, Anthony, Lefty, and Derringer Awards, and is co-founder of the Crime Writers of Color. Welcome, Gigi. It's good to see you.
Thanks so much.
And we have Rob Osler. Rob is our Robert L. Fish Memorial Award winner this year, and I think we all need to say congratulations to him. That's quite a feat. Congratulations, Rob.
Thank you. I'm
Rob,
still in shock about the whole thing, but I'm happy to be here.
It's a great story.
It is a great story. Rob's debut short story, Analog, appeared in Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine. His debut mystery novel, The Devil's Chew Toy, was published 2 months ago by Crooked Lane Books. Rob attended college in Washington, where he earned a master's degree in business. After many years of living in Seattle and San Francisco, he resides in Southern California with his longtime partner and a tall gray cat. You can learn more about Rob at his website at robosler.com. So welcome, everyone. This is, I've been looking forward to this little kickoff for a long, long time. You guys are an awesome collection of writers, and you really all come about it a different way. I mean, you've got everything from Michael with 1,200 stories. That's an amazing amount. It just boggles my mind. And then Rob with his very first published one. This was actually a very interesting judging process to go through and read all of these stories, but yours came to the top and just really surfaced. And I'm just pleased to be here with you. So congratulations all on your nominations, and Rob on your win. So congratulations all.
Thank you. Thanks, and congratulations, everyone.
Yes, thank you.
So I'd like to just kind of kick off a couple of questions to get us started and chime in anywhere you want. But I'll start with Michael and Andrew as kind of a co-writing team for the story Blindsided. I mean, good stories are compact and lean and sharp. How did you manage to write Blindsided together without any noticeable change in voice?
Well, it started with an idea that I had that I couldn't finish because I didn't know enough about football. And over dinner one night, I learned that Andrew's a diehard Cowboys fan. I said, well, I got this idea. What do you think? And so he jumped on board, and it went back and forth, 6-7 million times until we were happy with it. And And then what we did is basically I did the absolute last pass was mine, but by that time there really wasn't anything to do but say, let's mail it. Or sorry, we don't mail anymore. Let's send it. And it was just going back and forth repeatedly and trying not to have egos, because we wanted a good story, we didn't want to win points. We wanted to write a good story.
Yeah, Andrew, do you want to chime in on that? Because it really was seamless. If you didn't look at the author's names attached to it, you couldn't tell there were more than one.
Yeah, just to kind of build on that, we were at dinner and I was probably wearing my football hoodie and I had already written a football themed story for Michael for Guns and Tacos, a Beretta Burritos and Bears, about the Chicago Bears. So he knew that, you know, I was a fan and yeah, I mean, when Michael Bracken asked if you want to collaborate on a story, I mean, you say yes. So yeah, we passed back and forth and did, I think, most of our collaboration via email, and Michael did a final pass just to kind of make sure we had one clear voice speaking. And then, you know, after it was, you know, out of my hands, I didn't hear about it for a really long time until Michael called and said, you know, that we had sold it to Alfred Hitchcock. And, you know, I was just completely floored. I'd never sold a story to Alfred Hitchcock before. And I may have cried a manly tear when he told me that, but it was a dream come true for me to go to a brick and mortar bookstore and you know, pick up something off the shelf that had my name on it. So
that's very cool. How did you two team up to begin with? How did you meet Michael?
Tell him,
well,
Andrew.
Go ahead, Michael. Go ahead.
Well, I was at a science fiction convention on an panel about editing anthologies, and Andrew, we didn't know each other. Andrew was in the audience, and he heard about this anthology I was editing. And then, take the next step, Andrew. What'd you do?
Well, I should have gone up and introduced myself, but I was too much of a wallflower to do that. I went home and said, I'm going to write a story for this anthology, Eyes of Texas. Now, heretofore, I'd never written a private eye story before, or a mystery story or crime story. I mean, we were at a science fiction and fantasy convention, which is the genres that I was, you know, trying to learn more about. But 2 weeks later, I sent the story off, and around Christmas, I got an early Christmas gift for my first professional sale.
Very nice.
So pay attention at the panels. You can learn something.
Yeah.
Apparently.
Hey, Michael,
Yes.
how did you resolve any disagreements when you were working on the story?
We never really had any disagreements. That was the nice thing about working our collaboration is we both, before we even really started writing, we knew what the story arc was. So it was all, how do we get from point A to point B? So and it was just, and from there it was word choices. Well, Andrew knew more about football than I did, so I had to trust, okay, that's what the linebacker does, that's what the quarterback does. And I kind of had the emotional part of the arc. So we just kind of worked together. There really was no disagreements that I can remember.
Okay,
That's great.
The reason I asked that was because I tried it once with a guy that he and I liked the same authors, same type of stories, but when we tried to write together, we couldn't agree on the height of the PI, we couldn't agree on his name, and we could not agree on the story title. So maybe you lucked out.
I've collaborated with a handful of writers over the years, and this is a bit egotistical, but before I collaborate, I tell them all I get final draft. I mean, if we're going to collaborate, I get final draft, and so they're either on board or they're not. So far, that's worked, but a couple times we said, nah, I'd rather not work under those conditions. So, you know, somebody has to be the boss. you know.
Right.
I get it. Valerie and Tracy, you were both in the Midnight Hour anthology. Could you both of you talk about how that anthology came together and how you both ended up there? Because you're kind of reluctant short story writers, I gather.
I know I am.
Me too.
Short stories are sort of a specialized thing, right? People who do it well do it very well, and they have sort of experience doing it. It's kind of hard to sort of shove an entire story into 5,000 words or 10,000 words. So this is only my second one. So I was kind of reluctant to sort of do it because I wasn't sure that I could. And but I just sort of said yes when the email came through. So I said yes, not thinking too much about it. And then there was that moment of panic because now I knew I had to sort of come up with something, and I wasn't quite sure how to do that. So I sort of paced around for a while, and probably about a week until I sort of got a kernel of an idea. And then I sort of sit down and sort of see what I can do with that. I don't outline, I'm a pantser. So that's what pantsers do. So we sort of have a spark of an idea, and then we get to the laptop to see how we can twist it and turn it, find the angles, and come up with a pretty interesting story. And so it took quite a while to do that, to come up with the idea. And then quite a while after that, to sort of put this 5,000 words together in a form that made sense. So yes, and then panic, and then desperation, and then and then the story sort of came out. So I don't know how Valerie does it. That's how I sort of stumble through. And it seemed to work this time. So next time might be different.
Pretty much
Valerie.
the same. I'm like, we're all a member of Crime Writers of Color, and there were a lot of the group, some members in the group decided they wanted to put together an anthology. And the first time that someone asked, Abby Vandiver, the editor, asked me if I wanted to be a part of it, and I said, no, I don't write short stories. It takes me a long time to get to the point, and I can't write short. I mean, it's hard. So I said no, and then a few people who had originally agreed to be in the anthology had changed their mind, or life happened, and she came back and she's like, I really want to have 20 authors, so rethink it. And I was like, oh, okay, I just finished my deadline, so yeah, I'll give it a shot. Why not? I've never written a short story. Well, I've written short stories. I've never gotten anything published before, so this is my first published short story. And I thought, well, okay, I'll give it a shot. Like Tracy, I'm a pantser, so I just sat down and got an idea. I was really into watching a lot of nonfiction, a lot of documentaries, and I saw a documentary on the art theft from the Gardner Museum, and I thought, man, that this has never been solved. There's like $20 million reward out for these paintings, and how cool would that be to try and come up with some idea? So that's pretty much what I did.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned you were watching the documentaries because there was so much detail about art theft in here. I was wondering about your prior career. You have me
No,
worried for a
I
little
did
bit.
not have a history of art theft in my background. I just was intrigued by that because the statute of limitations is off. So if anybody finds these paintings, you can get the 10 or $20 million reward, whatever that is, is open for those. So they just want the paintings back, and they have the frames on the wall with no picture because they still haven't found those paintings. And I've just been intrigued, like, how do you hide a Vermeer for all this time, and who has it, and how would you get away with that? So those were just sort of the ideas that came through my mind. But no, I don't have a history with art theft.
That's good to know.
Lots of research.
So I just want to jump in and say that one of the really cool things about the Midnight Hour anthology that both Valerie and Tracy are in is that the stories in there are there's such a breadth of stories. So both of your stories are so great, but they're so completely different. So that's so interesting, Valerie. I didn't know that that was the origin story of how you came to be in the anthology, because I loved your story and Tracy's too, but they're just so different, but they completely work, even though they're completely different styles of ways of approaching short stories.
Well, thank you.
That's a really great point, Gigi, because you've got, Valerie's story that's, I don't know if you'd say it's a cozy, but it kind of fits some of those guidelines. And then Tracy, it's probably the darkest one in the group. And you're such a nice lady, and you write dark stuff.
You have no idea. First of all, that sort of started because I just sort of watched an old man walking down the street with his groceries. And then the first question becomes, where is he going? And once he gets there, where will he be? And that's how the story started. And then, of course, being crime writers and being sort of fascinated with murder and killing and everything, there has to be a twist there somewhere. So the twist sort of took a little time to sort of work out, but it started with an old man. And like most pantsers, most of our stuff starts with a kernel of an idea. We see somebody in a coffee shop, somebody standing in line at the grocery store, and then the wheels start to turn. So that's how we approach it. I wish I could outline and sort of have a plan. I don't. I can't. My brain doesn't work that way.
I can't imagine writing a short story without knowing how it ends. That would, I would be paralyzed.
I had no idea. I had no idea until I got to the end, and there it was.
Well, Gigi, since you mentioned that, a question I came up with is, how do you begin writing a locked room short story? I mean, you're considered the queen of locked room mystery. How do you do that? I mean, it seems so complicated to me.
I think I've been a huge fan of locked room mysteries, so impossible crime stories, ever since I was a kid. And so I think it's one of those things that I'm just such a huge fan of the genre that my mind can just spin and come up with different ideas for it. And I had completed a successful novel before I ever wrote my first successful short story, because as others have said, it is such a short story is a challenging structure, because you have to get so much into a short amount of text that still has a meaningful impact with someone, that it's not just like reading, that it still has some significance at the end that's really satisfying to you. So for me, the thing that I realized how I could approach short stories and have them be satisfying for me was to write the same kind of impossible crime twist that I love to read. And so I have notebooks that are filled with ideas for impossible crime twists that I think about. So I have that ending idea before I ever start thinking about what story I can tell with that idea. And so it's actually kind of, in addition to being fun, it's also very frustrating, because there's one story that I started about more than 7 years ago on a trip. I had this really cool idea that, Valerie, you will appreciate this. I was in a museum and I had this really great idea for this impossible crime that involved a theft at a museum, but there's just one little kernel that isn't quite working. All these years later, I've set it aside and I keep hoping my subconscious will come up with the solution to it. So far, it hasn't. But for the locked room library, I had the idea for what that twist solution could be. And then only when I came up with the idea for the Locked Room Library, which is a fictional private library in San Francisco that specializes in the golden age of detective fiction, classic crime, especially impossible crime stories. But I thought, how cool would that be for that museum to exist? And then and then the story fell into place from there. But the first thing, I really have to know what that puzzle is that I'm going to solve, and then think about what characters and what setting and setup will work for that particular puzzle.
Very nice. Thank you, Gigi. Now, you just mentioned setting, and RT, I'd like to kind of jump over to you. The setting in Road to Hannah plays kind of a significant role in that story. How did you decide to craft a story in that location?
Well, the wife and I had gone to Maui several years, and we frequently went to Hana and drove that road. And one year I was reading the local newspaper, and there was a story in there about a young man that smoked the petals on the Gabriel's trumpet flower, which is hallucinogenic. And he went for a deep water swim and never came back. So I tried to put that together with the hairpin turns on the Hana Highway and kind of went from there. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. No, you know, you're a prolific storyteller, RT, and you've written stories under another name, another pen name. Why might that be?
Well, in the early years when I was working in Kansas City, I was working on the motorcycle gangs, and I was reading Easy Rider magazine for background to find out how they dressed, how they acted, how they thought. And I read a story and I said, that's really bad. I can do better than that. And so I wrote one up, submitted it to Easy Rider, and they bought it. That was my first story. The problem was special agents were not allowed to have outside employment, to include writing. So the two stories to Easy Rider and the story to Outlaw Biker were under street names for a byline. Pockets and Hump, which were my gang name. And the checks came in another name for which I had a alias driver's license. And my wife was a vice president for a federal credit union, so she could cash checks. And the old BNDD, Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs, taught a class in how to be somebody else, how to go undercover and have fake ID and everything. And they must have taught it really well because they never caught on to what I was doing.
Do you ever use characters from your experience in DEA and in law enforcement in your stories that you write? Do you use some of those characters now?
A lot of my characters are composites of the people I ran into on the street and the games they played mentally to make money. Their schemes and cons generally come out in my stories. Yes.
Very, very good. Now, Rob, again, congratulations on the Fish Memorial Award. This story analog, and if you haven't read it, I really encourage you to do that. It was kind of a unanimous judge's opinion that of the debut short stories we looked at, this was the one. So congratulations on that.
Thank you very much.
So since this was your first published short story, what did you learn in the process of putting the story together and getting it sold?
Well, I have to say it's been so different than the novel, which is really just about rewrites, rewrites and revisions and querying and revisions. I don't mean this to sound boastful in any way. It's just kind of fascinating to me that I just wrote it and sent it in. I was trying to think in preparation for this, like the different questions you might ask. And, oftentimes you'll have beta readers. Like I had a critique group for the novel. No one read the short story before I sent it in, which I think is unusual, I guess, given, the other stories that I hear. So it was really just the idea of the story, because of course the idea is everything. And it's been in the news, recently that Elon Musk was going to be on the board of Twitter. This is going somewhere, this story, don't worry. And then over the weekend, all of a sudden, he's not on the board of Twitter. Was it his choice, the board's choice? Was it, intense employee pushback? It'll probably come out at some point. As it happens, I was a consultant at Twitter a few years ago, and they had just hired a very non-tech, not CEO, but second in command to come in. And I was thinking, when I was actually having a meeting with this individual, it's like, how are you going to fare in this wildly different corporate culture? Because these cultures are very powerful in terms of the influence they have over employees and decision making. And basically, that's the core story idea of Analog is CEO who on paper has the most authority versus a very strong corporate culture, which is, antithetical to the way the CEO rolls. And who's going to win out? I mean, it's so powerful that, one could lose their mind. So that's really the kind of the impetus of the story.
Well, I understand a little bit more now, knowing your background of why you chose to set this in a high-tech environment and in Silicon Valley. So, what was your experience with Twitter and that life that led you here?
Yeah, and at one point I was an employee at Microsoft. So I've worked in
and
I'm
completely the dark
untapped
side.
person.
Yeah, dark side all the way.
Yeah, I keep like we were kidding before this started. It's like Gigi, I'm the first one. And it's like, Rob, you're still on mute, and I'm like, oh right. It's just I'm the most. I hate technology because it never works. So again, I could kind of channel the main character's anxiety and kind of imposter complex in this environment where it's so full, it's bursting with tech gurus, and he's not, yet he's supposed to be in charge. And and what is that? That is tension. And then I just dialed it up to the nearly absurd, because it's got to be entertaining and fast paced.
Wait, Rob, something you said makes me really curious that I would love to ask a quick question of everyone here. So you said that you just wrote the story and sent it off. So that actually reminds me of the first successful story that I did ever write. It took me a while to come up with the idea, but then I wrote it all in one afternoon at the San Francisco Public Library longhand. It just all came out. And I think I probably did have to revise it, but just getting the full thing down. So for the other short story writers, I'm hoping, Michael, that you can just write a story in one sitting. You come up with the idea and write the whole draft just right then sitting down. But is that a common experience, or is that just me and Rob? No,
I've done it, but it's not quite that easy. So back,
you still need revisions, but
yeah.
Andrew's shaking his head. I see Tracy's frowning.
Well, I've never written anything without having my first reader, my wife, read it and give me her honest opinion. And she doesn't hold anything back, which I commend her for. And I've never written anything, just all at one time like that either. It could take a month of working on weekends to get just a first draft of 5,000 words out. So I don't know if anyone has a different process, but.
I didn't write I didn't just sit down and write the whole story. I had the idea, and I'm more about characters. James, you mentioned my story was more cozy, and that's what I write. I write cozies. So that's going to be, I can't not have it cozy. I'm too much of a coward to have anything too dark. So it's going to be cozy-esque. And we were all given a theme. So whatever the crime had to take place at midnight. So that took a little thought for me to make sure that I was hitting that part of it, but it generally takes me a little bit longer. But I think probably because I'm a pantser, if I had an outline, I probably could, write it much faster.
I think one of you mentioned earlier about it's so important to cram so much information in those first opening lines that's got to be a difficult thing to do. I've dabbled in it, but not to the extent that you folks have. And Valerie, I mean, you set a tone and a voice in the first couple of paragraphs of your story that, I mean, sets the whole thing up. How did you do that?
Oh, thank you. I think that as a cozy writer, for me, character is very important because I think that's what brings cozy readers back. They, they come back because they like the characters. And so for me, the character is just very key. And once I know that character, then I can get their personality out on the page. And so I think that probably helped me with this short story was just my focus from cozy writing on character. I think setting's really important too, but a lot of the feedback I get from readers is, oh, I love RJ or I love Mama B or Nana Joe, characters in my book. And they're, they ask me, are they real characters? And they are kind of real to me, but not real in in the other sense of the word.
Yeah, very good. Now, I know RT mentioned that he's written under a pen name, but Michael has too. Has anybody else written under a pen name for their short stories?
Nope.
No. Okay. But I didn't know until today, Michael, that you wrote a series of spicy confession stories under a very unique pen name.
Well, yes, Rolinda Hay. But at one point in time, before the confession magazines ceased to exist a few years ago, I wrote something like 350 plus stories to True Confessions, True Romance, True Love, all those magazines. I was, as far as I know, the most productive male writer of confessions.
That's amazing. I saw that today. It just cracked me up. That was the best pen name ever.
Thank you. If nothing else, I write great pen names.
There you go. Oh, Lord. Tracy, you made a comment out there that writing short stories is like setting off on a year-long cruise around the world and being limited to one overnight bag. So now that you've written a very successful short story, are you going to pack that bag again and do some more of this?
Not voluntarily. I mean, if somebody asked me to contribute again, I might consider it, but I'm not going to go out there and say, hey, I'm going to write a short story and see where it's too hard. I would much prefer to have 90,000, 100,000 words to sort of expand and meander around and sort of create my characters and have them sort of live on the page. You don't have that space with 5,000. It's panic time. I can't imagine trying to stuff all of that into 5,000 words again voluntarily. If somebody asked me twist my arm, I might say, okay, fine, I'll do one, but I'm not gonna put myself out there. I don't need the stress. I'm too old for this. I mean, really.
That's great. This is kind of a question for all of you, and it kind of piggybacks on what Tracy just said. Is short doesn't mean easy, and there's a perception out there that it's short fiction, so it's must be easy, but it's really not. And Tracy just described why. What can you tell aspiring short story writers to get them pointed in the right direction? And I'll just throw this out to all of you. And what would your advice be?
Right. Seriously, just sit at the keyboard and pound the keys. There were many years where I was writing a story a week or more. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. It's like anything. You constantly doing something, you're ultimately going to get better at it. And so just do it. Don't let anything hold you back.
And that's how you wrote 1,200 published stories.
Exactly.
I love that advice. I often give that advice. I'm a mentor in a MFA program at Seton Hill, and I give that advice to everybody. Every people who want to write, whether it's short stories or novels, whatever it is, write. Don't just think about it, just sit down and do it, because you can always edit or revise once you have something on the page, but you can't revise a blank page. So you need to just get the words out there. Don't worry about the formatting. Don't worry about how long or whatever. And if it goes too long and you really want it to be a short story, you can cut words. Or if it's too long, it may end up being a manuscript, a full-length manuscript. So just go with it. But the key is really to not stress about it and just do it. Just write.
I think you have to be a reader too.
Yeah.
You know, just reading a lot of great, whether it's novels, whether it's short fiction, whatever genre you choose, the more that you read, you internalize those voices, and it helps you develop your own voice. So it not just writing a lot, you constantly reading.
Two things about reading. Number one, read great writers so you have something to aspire to, but read terrible writers so you know how bad you can be and still be published.
Okay, I have
You're
to
not talking about any particular person, but
I have to disagree with Michael there, because life is too short to read bad writers. So I always say, read what you love, and that's what you should, try to do your own spin on what you love. But since Andrew took my biggest tip is, to read and figure out what you love. So I will give one other tip, which I find is great for both novels and short stories, which is if you're scared looking at the blank screen, write your ideas down on a paper notebook. There's something different about the way that you can get ideas down on paper, I find, and I still use this trick after a dozen novels and more than a dozen short stories, that it's just so freeing. And that's how I'm able to sometimes, once I get ideas down, I can just really quick get a whole draft down in a short amount of time, because there's something less scary and more freeing about writing on paper.
Very, very good. I use paper too. It's just something about that kinesthetic learning. You get the ideas a different pathway, and it's interesting that way.
Yeah.
How about RT? I mean, you've had quite a career of doing short stories. What keeps you motivated, and how do you keep pushing these stories forward?
Well, since I write only short stories, other than one nonfiction book under an alias that we won't talk about and you won't find anywhere on purpose. What I usually do is I start with a scene, and like Valerie, I put a character in the scene, and I will end up writing as far as I can on that scene. I don't know where it's going, but to me, it's a great scene. And I will end up with anywhere from 3 to 5 different story starts. So on any given day, I can pick the story start that I like and work on it. So it may take me a while to finish a story, but then I usually end up with 5 stories finished about the same time. But that way I kind of avoid writer's block. I've always got something that I'm interested in writing about.
That's interesting. So you can work on multiple projects and multiple characters almost at the same time. That's good compartmentalization. Yeah, that's a good point.
That may say something about my mind. I don't know. I've been so many people that maybe it's easier.
No, that's great. That's great, RT. I want to remind our viewers out there, if you have any questions for these fine authors, please put them in the chat, and we'll get to them as we move on. I have another question for all of you to kind of pipe in again, and that's, what's the one story you've always wanted to write but haven't done it yet? And Rob, why don't we start with you? And it could be even a novel.
Yeah, it's actually what I started, and it was terrible, so I put it away for a long time. But I want to write a cozy series. I'm a big tennis fan and tennis player. I want to write, nobody steal this idea. I want to write a cozy mystery series that it's the chair umpire who solves the crime. And so it follows the professional tour around the world, you know, so it's got that James Bond element of like these, because right now they're playing, the men's tour is in Monte Carlo, right? I mean, they don't go to, sorry,
Visalia.
I'll pick Boise, Idaho, because I'm born and raised, so I can diss Boise, Idaho. They don't go to Boise, Idaho. They go to London and Monte Carlo and Barcelona. So you've got these great settings, and you've got crazy characters and a lot of money and their entourages. And the chair umpire kind of, you know, sits back and just officiates each match. They'd be the perfect person to, like, you know, solve the crime because they have all the access and they follow the tour. But they can kind of, you know, they're in this kind of natural place of observance, you know, observing things. So that's my idea.
That's interesting. Well, good. Yeah, good luck with that. I think that'll work. How about anybody else? Gigi, what story haven't you written that you really want to write, but you just haven't done it?
Okay, I have two answers to this, so I'll be quick. So the book that I'm actually just finishing revisions on now, so my new Secret Staircase mystery series, which starts with Under Lock and Skeleton Key, which just came out this past month. With the way that publishing works, I'm just finishing revisions on the second book in the series right now, which will be out early next year. And so the whole series is Locked Room Mysteries. And so for the second book in this series, I've written so many Locked Room Mystery short stories, but Under Lock and Skeleton Key is my first full-length novel that has a locked room mystery front and center, not just as a subplot, but it's the main plot of the book. And I'm so proud of this book. But for the second book in the series, I have one murder with 4 impossibilities. So I'm stepping up my locked room mystery game, and it was really hard to pull it off. And I think I've pulled it off. So I'm really excited that I have finally done that. But so my second answer, though, what I haven't done yet is in this series, there's one character that is a family member. So Tempest Raj is the main character of this series. And in the first book, the first early draft of the book, she has an uncle who I absolutely fell in love with, and I love him, and he just didn't fit in the story at all. So I want to follow his adventures and this is when the book went from California to Scotland to India, and now it's just set in California but has a Scotland and India backstory. So it was follow his adventures in Scotland and be a gothic cozy mystery, which I would really love to tell. So he's the character that got cut from the new series, but I'm in love with him, so I want to find time to write his story too.
Oh, that's very cool.
That is
And
awesome.
that kind of leads. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was just saying, I think that's awesome.
Yeah, that does sound good. How about you, Valerie? What have you been putting off?
All right. So I would love to be able to write. I write cozies. I'd love to be able to write at least one book in lots of different genres, like everything, but I want to write a sci-fi cozy. So that's what I would love to write. But I also have started a fairy tale cozy. So I guess mixing my love of cozies in other genres. I don't think I may be able to do one horror, but that would probably be it for me because, like I said, I'm a coward. So
Yeah. Sci-fi cozy. That sounds interesting, though.
I'd love to do a sci-fi
That might
cozy.
be fun. Yeah, that'd be fun.
I
Michael,
think so.
what's something to be out of the box for you to write that you've been kind of putting off?
I'm not sure there is anything. I've written and sold work in every genre I'm aware of. Maybe not the way down in the deep subgenres, but I've sold so much. And usually what happens with a story is if I get an idea, sometimes I'm not quite skilled yet, but a year or two later, I've gained a skill and I can finish the story. Or there are stories I set aside because there's no market for it. So I wait, here comes an anthology, here comes an invite, here comes something, and then I go ahead and finish it. So there's nothing that I'm dying to finish, but like RT, I've got multiple stories in progress at any one time.
Oh, very good. Well, with the time we have left, I mean, Gigi started a little bit, told us about Under Lock and Skeleton Key, but why don't we why don't we finish with Gigi and tell us a little bit more about your recent book and where that's going to go.
Yeah, so Under Lock and Skeleton Key just came out last month. So it's been really exciting to be venturing back out into the world, doing some book events for this. So a combination of virtual events, which are wonderful because we can see so many people everywhere, but also doing some in-person events. So Under Lock and Skeleton Key is about Tempest Raj, who her career has just been sabotaged. So she's moved back home to her small town in Northern California to work for the family business. And if her career hadn't been sabotaged, it would be a really cool family business because Secret Staircase Construction is no ordinary home renovation company. They build magic into people's homes through things like sliding bookcases and grandfather clocks that aren't what they seem and lead to hidden gardens and secret staircases and things like that. But the family curse has followed her home. So the first day on a new project, her stage double is found dead inside a wall that's been sealed for nearly 100 years. So it's an impossible crime. And was it meant to be Tempest? So she has to find out how her stage double was killed and ended up inside this impossible situation. And so it's the first book in a new series that I'm so excited about because I finally I'm putting my love of locked room mysteries on the page, and so many things that I love are in this series that I now think I'm a good enough writer to write this series. So I'm just very excited about it.
Well, you should be. It's getting great reviews, and I'm just happy for you. That's
wonderful. Oh, thank you so much.
Rob, let's jump over to you. I mean, you've had a heck of a year. You know, you've got an award-winning short story, and 2 months ago, your debut novel came out, The Devil's Chew Toy. So tell us a little bit about your novel now.
Devil's Chew Toy. Now for something completely different. The story takes place in present-day Seattle, Washington, and it features a guy named Hayden McCall. He's a 25-year-old redheaded school teacher, part-time relationship blogger, which is ironic because he has no relationship. And he puts himself out there one night at the dance club. He goes to tip a go-go boy. And yes, there are go-go boys in addition to go-go girls. They're not prostitutes. They're go-go. I pitched this story years ago at the San Francisco Writers Conference at speed dating. And it took me like all of my 3-minute allocation just to explain what a go-go boy is to these different agents. So anyway, he goes up to tip the go-go boy, and this crazy accident happens. And it just precipitates this series of events, which result in him waking up in the morning. There's a disappearance of the go-go boy has disappeared, and the police are at the door. And by the way, the go-go boy has a dog named Commander who's left behind. And so poor Hayden has to deal with the dog, yet he lives at Orca Arms. Think about it, his apartment building, which doesn't allow pets. So he takes the dog home, and then in trying to find the go-go boy, he befriends Hollister, who's a butch lesbian, and they become friends, an improbable friendship, and they go in search of the go-go boy. That's Devil's Chew Toy. So it's a crazy kind of madcap romp across present-day Seattle in search of a missing guy.
And it's really good. I got an early copy and it's excellent.
That's nice. Very good, Rob. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Now, Tracy, you've got a novel coming out in December, and the title is Hide.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about that one.
Well, it's the start of a new series. Features Detective Harriet Foster, who's the head of a team of homicide detectives here in the city of Chicago. And she's coming off a bit of a trauma. She's divorced. Her only child has been killed in a street accident. And her partner committed suicide. So we meet Harriet 2 months after this latest tragedy. She's got a new house and a new case. She has a killer on the streets of Chicago who is hiding the bodies of young women under things. So on Riverwalk, under Wacker Drive, in a dumpster. So she has to figure out, and her team does, who the killer is, and so she can stop this carnage. So we follow Harriet through her trauma and through her case, and I have good hopes for it. It comes out in December, and fingers crossed.
Absolutely. Well, congrats, Tracy. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Valerie, you've got one that recently came out, Killer Words. I think that's the 7th in the Mystery Bookshop series.
Yes, that's the 7th of my Mystery Bookshop series, and I have copy edits on my computer right now for book 8 in the series. And but I also have a new series coming out in August. That's a culinary cozy set in the fictitious town of New Bison, Michigan. And it features a young kind of fashionista, social media influencer who cannot cook, who inherits her great aunt's bakery. And the stipulation for her receiving this is that she has to stay in New Bison for a year and run the bakery and keep her great aunt's 250-pound English Mastiff. And so it follows a person who can't cook owning a bakery in Michigan, in Southwest Michigan. So always nervous whenever anything new comes out. So I'm a little nervous. Hopefully people will like it, but it has recipes. So, and it has dogs. So cozies.
You can't lose.
Can't lose. Dogs and food.
Congratulations, Val. That's great.
Thank you.
Andrew, what's coming up for you?
Well, I have a story coming up in Mickey Finn 3. Home is the Hunter. I guess that will come out in December. Michael is the editor. I have a solo sale in Alfred Hitchcock that they haven't told me when it will come out. I was hopefully, sometime soon, maybe this year. And I've sold a couple of more stories. I don't know if I should. Michael, have you done any announcement for the Private Eyes of the 70s?
I haven't done any formal announcements, but
okay, well, things have been sold or in the works. So, yeah,
good for you.
You can find out more at jamesahern.com as to when things are released.
Wonderful, good for you. RT, what's coming out next from you?
I finally wrote my first PI story, and I searched around trying to find a different background for it because it seemed like all the good ones were already used, and I didn't want to use the typical drunk PI. And so I wrote the story. I named it after, the title was named after the character. And the wife and I were on a Caribbean cruise here last month, and the junior waiter from Indonesia looked at me and he said, "Are you a Texas Ranger?" And I think he was going by the mustache. And I said, "No, I was DEA and a writer." And it turned out he had been contract worker in Mumbai at the hotel that got bombed by terrorists a few years ago. And he was interviewed for 2 days by the FBI and the CIA because he was not at his regular post. So he was impressed with any kind of federal law enforcement, and he asked if he could be a character in one of my stories. And I think he was assuming that he would get to be a rescuing knight in shining armor, but all of my knights have tarnished armor. So I changed the name of the story and named it after him and put him in as one of the characters. So we'll see if anybody buys it.
Very good. And Michael, we'll end with you. And you're up to so many different things. What's next? What's next for you?
Well, I'm doing more editing than writing these days. My latest anthology, Groovy Gumshoes, Private Eyes of the Psychedelic 60s, came out yesterday. And on Sunday, I turned in the sequel to that, which will be due out next year. I edited an anthology series called Mickey Finn. The second one came out in December. The third one comes out next December. And I've got the stories for the subsequent one. I haven't edited and turned them in yet. I've got several other anthologies in the works. But as far as stories, I have a story in Groovy Gumshoes, and I have a story coming in the next issue of Ellery Queen. It's a more traditional mystery than I normally write.
That's wonderful. We probably have time for one question, and it's one came in the chat, and my dog is chiming in to help me. How many of you write stories on Spec without having a place to sell it beforehand?
I do both.
I do both too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all the time.
Okay, that seems to be the consensus there. And we have, it's kind of a comment. It's, the question is, how long can it take to write a short story? Stanley Ellen, considered one of the greatest short story writers, sometimes took a full year per story. How long does it take you to write a story? I heard kind of a varying
It depends
spectrum
on the
here.
story. It depends. I've written stories in a single day, but I had one story. It was 17 years from the first word to publication.
Oh,
It
wow.
just depends on the story. But if
Yeah.
you're only working on one at a time, that can be a problem. But if you're working on lots of stories, it doesn't seem like it took that long. And the actual writing was maybe a few weeks, but spread out over 17 years, it's not so bad.
Michael, you made me feel much better because I have my story I started 7 years ago that I can't figure out one little thing about it. So
It's
so
a
I have
baby. Release it when it's a teenager.
We are running out of time. This has been a great panel. I've loved talking with you guys. I could talk for another whole day with you in a room. I think Left Coast Crime got me energized to do that again. But please, for the folks listening out there, don't forget to purchase these stories and the books that they mentioned. There should be links in the chat for you to check those out. Try to get those from independent bookstores where you can. Visit MWA's website and follow us at the hashtag Edgar's 2022 for future events. And don't forget, on April 28th, join us for a live stream of the Edgar Awards, where one of these people will be awarded the Edgar Award for the best short story.
Is that a
And
hint?
That's a hint.
Uh-oh, that's
Oh,
not us,
darn.
Andrew.
That was one story, and it's one person.
Okay.
Yeah, come on. Yeah, I hope you do come. All of it would be great to see you there, and I think that'd be great to celebrate together, because these stories were all just tremendous, and you're all winners as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.